What did you find out about a family member after they passed away from going through the belongings? My grandma never gave me, my sisters this Bratz car plus doll pack before she died. Found the box on the top shelf of her closet, hopefully where it was out of sight and out of mind, rather than a reminder that we are all adults now. We haven't been into Bratz dolls in over a decade. My great-grandma had a millionaire trying wife her up, but she went after a broke-ass dude instead. My great-aunt had a bunch of bodice ripper novels with fake dust jackets over them that had classic and academic book titles, so you wouldn't know that it was a raunchy book until you took the dust jacket off. My grandma saved a few three that we found out about people from homelessness. She never said a word to anyone. I found a lot of poems that my grandmother wrote about how unhappy she was in her marriage and how she just wanted to feel loved again. Skeptical smiley face. My wife was suicidal long before I met her. She had private diary she kept. After she passed, I finally read it. To this day I wonder what would have changed if had read it earlier. Don't put that on yourself. My dad tried really hard to make things work with my mom. Found a stash of letters and other documents related to the divorce. Found a very heartfelt letter pleading with my mom to try to talk things out and do what's best for the kids. As far as the divorce, he basically let her take everything. Mom always made it seem like he just gave up on us. Turns out she gave up on him and he was trying really hard to make things work. He just did it behind the scenes to not stress out my brother and I. That my grandpa was really unhappy and lonely. He would write these letters to my grandma trying to forgive her for horrible things she did, and she would turn them back on him. He was 68 years old and was barely making ends meet because of her excessive spending. Every Christmas he would get the grandkids these amazing gifts, and all this time no one had any idea what kind of trouble they were in financially. My great-aunt dated Curly from the Three Stooges. She had mentioned it to me once because I was wearing a shirt with his face on it. Everyone laughed and brushed it off due to her dementia. Cleaning out her house, we found a picture of them together tucked inside of a book. That my great-grandparents married, divorced, then married again, then divorced again. There was rumored to be a third marriage and divorce between them too, but we only found the paperwork for the first two. They were born late 1800s and both died in the 1980s. What was so funny was that in the files the divorce papers were next to the marriage certificates, telling us a very quick visual story. Other cool things we found: teeth, about 10 total. My grandfather was a dentist, so they could have belonged to anyone really. A lock of hair from my grandfather's sister who died at age 3 from pneumonia. 14 boxes of Band-Aids. And a social security card for a relative born in 1900. Update: the social security card I now believe was a Medicare card. The confusion was that it says health insurance social security. I'm going to try to link the only picture of the card I have. Not sure how old that was either. My grandmother kept every card or letter ever given to her. It was so sweet to go through them and recognize a card I gave her when I was a kid. The coolest thing was finding the letter my uncle wrote to her explaining that he was gay and diagnosed with HIV. He had been to visit her the month prior and just couldn't tell her. My grandma was very hard of hearing, so telling her on the phone wasn't an option. My aunt and uncle took her the letter and offered to answer any questions she had. My Irish Catholic grandmother said, "He's my son and I love him." Reading the letter and hearing that story made me love that woman so much more than I already did. My grandfather kept a grenade from World War II. He had it hidden in an old beat-up footlocker. The pin had started to erode, so only small portions of it were in the hole. I remember accidentally dropping the trunk down the stairs when we moved him out of my aunt's house and into his retirement home. He kept the trunk with him all 10 years he was in the home. He must have moved rooms at least a dozen times. Then we lugged the trunk to my parents' house to clean it out after he died. That 60-plus-year-old unstable explosive was jostled around so many times. It's a miracle it didn't self-detonate. We ended up calling the police to have them safely remove it from the trunk for us. Thanks, Grandpa. Great-grandmother passed away. We found a letter from her brother written in the 1930s. The letter is cryptic. but hints to the fact that Arthur was disposed of and shouldn't be an issue. Arthur would be my great-grandfather who left to Chicago for a job and was never heard from again. Growing up, me and my brother and sister had a legacy from our great-grandma that was going to go to college. 10 years later my parents split up, and for the rest of our lives we heard how awful our dad was for losing our legacy in the stock market and that we should make him pay it back. Mom died in 2013, and we had to go through all her stuff. She had a collection of journals detailing all her struggles and coping. The thing that struck me was how infrequent we children were mentioned, and usually it was to complain about some slight. But in one set of journals we found financial records of our legacy, and saw that her second husband had borrowed every cent, then left Mom high and dry. Surprise! I had an uncle that died. He lived by himself and everyone thought he was just a curmudgeon. He left everything he had to a 20-something man and only left $5 each to his ex and kids. I then found a paper showing that my uncle was not the father of his and his wife's 6 children. The funeral was fun as in the wife and kids fought with everyone to get my uncle's stuff. The man he gave everything to was his son with a woman he met long ago. After all his kids were born, the wife and her kids wanted his land so they could sell it for millions. The man was his son. Oh, that's a twist. I thought he was secretly gay and it was his lover or something. My mom managed to stash something like $30,000 all around the house. To this day I still wonder if any of the things we ultimately got rid of maybe had some money hidden in them somewhere. My sweet, petite, Christian grandmother had a hog of a vibrator and some way old 1960s made with a typewriter old age difference porn. My dad had a post office box no one knew about. When I discovered it, my mind went immediately to the worst. He had a credit card that my mom didn't know about. When I asked her about it, she looked at the charges and realized that in the months before he died, she was getting worried about finances. So he took out another credit card so they could have dinners out without her seeing them added to their official credit card bill and overly worry. That was just like my dad. Also, quite literally a week before he died unexpectedly, my dad paid for some program where if he passed away, the mortgage would be entirely paid for. After my granddad died, my grandmother and my dad went through his stuff and found his birth certificate. Turns out he was 10 years older than he claimed. Nobody knew. They reckon he did it so he could join the army during WW2. My grandmother swore up and down about how nasty her daughter-in-law my aunt was. Turns out right after the fight those two had, my aunt sent a very heartfelt apology letter and tried for years to make up for it. My grandmother hated her for never apologizing. My grandmother kept this apology in her purse with her passport, green card, social security card, important shit that means something to her. She didn't want us to see the apology. The letter was 20 years old and both people are dead. It's so sad to see people die so bitter. My aunt passed away and I found a folder in a drawer next to her bed. It was all the love letters and Valentine's cards my uncle gave her for over 50 years. I am not a sentimental dude, but damn. A couple days after my stepdad was killed, suddenly hit by person who ran a red light, my mom was very upset that she couldn't figure out how to recover this voicemail from him she deleted accidentally. He sent it a week or so prior while she was alone visiting us in another state. My wife was able to recover the voicemail somehow and it was amazing. It was basically like a goodbye for us. All it was him talking about how much he loves and misses all of us, including my kids. Other than the initial call, I hadn't broke down yet and I lost it after that one. World lost a great man. We found a letter in my grandmother's belongings from my late uncle. He died in the Korean War conflict. In this letter he told his mom that his girlfriend was pregnant and had given birth to a boy and that they were going to get married, and asked her not to say anything at that time to other family members. He was killed in action not long afterwards. We don't know the girlfriend's name, whether she kept the child or adopted it. Nothing. My grandmother took that knowledge to the grave with her. We have all taken DNA tests trying to locate our first cousin, a piece of our uncle. No luck so far, but it could still happen. My grandmother was a drinker the whole time I knew her. She died when I was 10 of cirrhosis. My grandparents would babysit us during summer vacation and she'd always tell us to get in the car because we're going to Timbuktu. We never ended up getting out of the car, but Timbuktu apparently had bars on the windows and neon signs in them. Her mixer of choice was 7-Up and she'd put the vodka in the cans and just leave them in the fridge. For years I thought pop went really bad once you put it open in the fridge, and also it would make you feel funny if you had a couple sips. By the time I was in high school I realized what she did that whole time. Timbuktu was the liquor store. The 7-Up was spiked. She drank herself to death. When I was in my 20s I was going through some boxes at my parents' house and I found one of those Alcoholics Anonymous books. I thought it was strange since my parents didn't drink. Never mind need AA. I opened it and all these people had signed it with various messages. You're so strong Joy. One day at a time, etc. No clue what year it was from but she apparently was in AA at one time, but relapsed and never got sober again. I wouldn't know. The first thing I did when my brother died was delete his search history. I felt I owed him that much. At age 18 I had insane debt but never could figure out why. At age 22 my mom passed away. In her closet was 98 cartons of basic non-filter cigarettes. She took out credit cards and everything in my name to buy them. The only thing we can figure is this was during her onset of dementia. She went downhill quick once she was diagnosed. No one knew she had cancer till after she passed either. My great-grandmother who passed at 91 was always rather promiscuous. She had 3 children none of us knew about. She'd had 2 before her first marriage and 1 that was an affair as far as we can tell. All 3 were put up for adoption. We all kind of were aware of the last one. However, she denied that child all the way to the grave. My grandmother 69 and her sister 74 have been trying to track down their previously unknown siblings since. So far they tracked down the widow of the youngest one. She'd died at 50-something in a car accident.